Okay, good morning, everybody. If you want to just let us know that you can hear us, that would be great. Just type into the chat message box. Okay, thank you. So we are going to get started this morning. There may be a few other people that join in later, and that's okay. We've got about 5 or 6 that are here now. And first of all, my name is Quinn Cole. I'm going to be going through the Qualtrics interface with regard to the kindergarten registration or pre-registration interface, the data that you'll see on the back end. And I'll first show you how to get there if you're not already logged in, and then go through the dashboard, managing your view of the data and analysis screen, as well as digging a little deeper at getting at individual records. And then we'll have some reminders at the end. If you have any questions, feel free to type into the chat those questions. Stephanie Cass is with me, and she'll be handling those questions as we move along so that we can address them during the webinar. So first off, please let me know if you're able to log into the into Qualtrics. Okay, is anybody not in Qualtrics? I will do a quick, I'll just show you quickly how to get in there. I'm going to log out of here. If you look on your screen, so right now, you're just going to type in your first dot last name. You're going to go to district196.qualtrics.com. Qualtrics is how it's spelled. And you're going to do your first dot last name and your network email / email password, and then click the sign in button. We had mentioned in an email yesterday that we had given all of you access to your respective forms. Some of you had already had a chance to go in and look at some of that information. I'm going to actually go into our demo one where we made the master copy just to show you some of the features, so I'm not messing with any real data at the moment. We'll eventually get into one of them that actually has some data. Right now, as you can see, most of the schools have at least one record, one parent that has, or family that has submitted for a child. And we'll get into one of those once I walk through some of the interface in a second here. So first, I'm going to go to test version of this form. So when you go in, if you click on the title of your kindergarten registration form, this is the screen you should come to. It's the editing interface. You're immediately going to go over to data and analysis. In here, you will see a whole bunch of information. Initially, what Qualtrics does is it tries to look at the questions that you have, and to the best of its ability, it's kind of got some sort of algorithm in the back, and it tries to pick out the questions that might be most useful for you to see first. That doesn't necessarily mean it's accurate, but it tries to do that for you. Once you're in here, there is a bunch of different stuff you can do. First off, I just want to point out the tools menu. There are specific columns that we had talked about during the face-to-face training a couple weeks ago about how you're probably going to want to see the child's name as well as their birth date and gender and maybe a couple other things. So if you go to the tools menu, there is an option to choose columns. And right now you will see checkboxes next to the ones that are actually showing behind this menu on your screen. So right now there's child's gender is checked here. I can go down to other information here, and there are other items checked: first name, last name. I'm going to click off of here just for a second. There are a couple ways that you can add information in. You can go into the tools menu and choose columns, and you can simply just go in and say, you know what, I want the birth date of this child. Right now, this one actually does have that. But if I were to go in here, right now it's broken down by month, day, year field when they actually fill it out. But I can just go in here and say, choose child's birth date. And that will, when I choose it from this menu, it will put it onto the right part of the screen. So here's the birth date for the child, and right now it's the month. But we can also change that and add other information in. And one other way that we can do that is we can add in, click the plus sign on either side of here. So if I want to insert something in between child's full name and status, I can just click the plus sign here and bring up the menu, and I can then go in and say, you know what, I want the question of whether they're born outside of the 50 United States. I want that inserted in between. It'll take a second and it'll add that in. Now, in reality, it probably isn't that important to you, but just to give you an idea of how you can add that. So you can customize from left to right, what you have displayed first. So if I want the name displayed first, I can go in and I can left click on the header of the column, and I can do a couple different things. First of all, I can sort A to Z or Z to A. I can hide the column, or I can move the column left and right. So in this case, I want to move the column left, and I want to have the name first. And I can just keep moving it to the left until I've got it in the position on the screen that I want it. One thing to note, let me just zoom out here a little bit. So this is all the columns right now that you're looking at that you can see, that I can see. One thing to note is on the right side, you will always have your actions column. That will always be there. That provides you with some other options and capabilities that we've talked about before that we'll go through again here. The other thing that you'll have is all the way over to the left, you will always have the recorded date. This is the timestamp that they've submitted their information, submitted their form with all the info that they provided. And it's always ordered by the most recent at the top, by default. So right now what I can do is I can go in here and I can say, you know what, I want, you may not see status on yours. Status is the embedded data field where you can then go in and edit. If I wanted to go in here, I could go under tools, choose columns, and I can go to embedded data and I can select status. And then that adds that field in there so that you can put in, type in information into here just by clicking the edit button here and then clicking on this and typing in and saying, completed or registered, whatever you want to put in there that makes sense for your school, putting in notes and stuff. The other thing that was brought up with regard to other information you might want to include that's not necessarily part of what the parent fills out is they wanted to have something that was not just the status of that record, but also maybe putting in a student ID. Right underneath our tools, we can actually create a new field. And I can go in here and I can say, okay, I want that to be student ID. Because you may want to go in with the information before the parent even comes on the 7th and 8th of February and look up and see if that student is already in there. Maybe they have gone to preschool. Maybe they had filled out some information that prompted us earlier before kindergarten registration to put their information into our Synergy system, student information system. You could then look up the information, and if you wanted to just kind of keep everything in one location so when that parent walks in, you could create student ID and say, I want that to be a text field, and create that variable. Takes a second. It's going to create it for us. It redraws your screen. And then if I go back to, so it just came back, and now I've got student ID, and notice it put it on the right-hand side. So now I can go in and I can edit, and I can also add student ID. That field wasn't previously there because it wasn't something we were asking the parents to submit, but you can now include the student ID. So when the parent comes in, you could potentially have several of these rows filled out. You could look through the information, see what information they may not have provided, and make sure that you just write some notes down for each of those. So you could put the status in here, and then you can also include the student ID if they have one already in our student information system, and just type that number in right there. And that column is done. The other thing that you can do is just to step back 1 second. Creating the student ID, you just go in under Tools, and you're creating new field. And again, you're calling it, you're giving it a name, and you're calling it, in this case, we are doing a text field because we're just typing in text. There are some other ones which I won't go into detail today, but there's tags, numeric, and date as well. And it's manual tab. You're just manually creating this. The manual tab, there's bucketing and there's formula. You're not going to use these other two right now. Manual gives you the most flexibility in creating different types, and you want to be able to have that option to do text. So you'll stick to this manual here, and then type in your name, choose text, and click create. I'm going to close out of there because I've already created that student ID. And then if I wanted, for example, to move this, I can then take this and I can move this left. And I might want, in this case, to have the student ID all of the way at the beginning, right before the name. I can do that just by clicking on the column header and doing left until it's all the way there. Keep in mind that there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are, quite a few columns here. Some of these we may not even need. I can just hide that column. This one I might want to move to the left, so it's along with the last name. So now I've got student ID. This one, there has been some question about whether we want to include the immunization form column to see if they've uploaded it. You'll notice that in 2 of these right here, they uploaded a PDF file, so you can tell that they uploaded that. Then what you can do is you could actually go into that record and you could say, okay, I want to view this response. Going under the actions menu, clicking on that drop down for that record and say view response. In here, there are a few things that you can do. Number 1, you can tell the duration it took for this parent to fill out the form. It took them 11 minutes in this case. Keep in mind that the information I'm showing you here, it is actually test data, so this may not be the actual how long it takes them. But I can scroll through here and I can see the information that they have provided, including a link to the PDF file. So I can just click on this and I can then look at that document. Now in this case, this is not an immunization record, it's just an example document we uploaded. But I can click that. So that opens up in a separate tab. I can then click that close and I'm back to my screen where I'm looking at each of the pieces of information the parent provided. And I can see, what information they provide. So like right here, you'll notice that all these fields down below are gray. Keep in mind that in this question it said, in addition to the child you're registering for kindergarten, and the parent 1 and 2, are there any additional occupants living in the child's primary address? This person said no. That's why these following set of questions are grayed out, because they don't need to fill that information out because they don't have additional occupants. So you'll notice that in some of that's just based on the logic behind the scene of not showing those questions. They were not required to fill those out because they don't have information to input there. So that's why they are showed as gray. So just keep that in mind. It shouldn't be a concern for you. And then you can scroll down and look through all the other information on here just as they saw it and filled out the information. The other thing that you can do is you can export to PDF if you need to. Keep in mind, we do not have any, Jill Coyle, our legal counsel, said that it is okay if you need to export this as a PDF. You have the option to print it out and put it in Cume file. You also have the option of taking that document and putting it into, it's the documents folder tied to the student tab in Synergy to keep that information there, and then that would just move with them. So you have all this information there if you want to. That is an option for you. So that, just so that you can do, you can also, if you get in here and you see that there's information where they start to fill stuff out and then just stopped, and there's not enough information there, you could delete response, but just be careful about this, deleting responses, that you don't delete the wrong one. I can also tab through, so you can see down at the bottom here on this pop-up screen that there's 4 of 10 here. I can page through that just by using these paddles here, and it will show me, you know, the next submission that is in there. I'm going to close this for the moment. I want to direct your attention up to the top right corner here. You'll see that there's 2 things listed here. One is recorded responses, and there's 10 here. One is responses in progress, which says there's 15. So let me just back out of here a sec. I'm going to actually go back to projects, and I'm going to go into one of our schools that has larger amounts. Give me a second. So at Greenleaf Elementary School, we have 12 responses. So I'm going to go into Greenleaf. So this is, I'm going to go into data analysis for Greenleaf. This is real data we're looking at. These are parents that have submitted information. Keep in mind on this screen, this hasn't been customized yet. So you're seeing stuff like child's ethnicity, child's gender, child's race. These, like ethnicity and race, may not be important to see on the screen. But right now, what I want to direct you to is in the upper right corner again. There's recorded responses and there's responses in progress. Right now, we're on the recorded responses screen. These are families that have completed the entire process. They've completed the entire form. If I go to responses in progress, I can click on that. This shows me some information as far as the capability to see where they are. So if I zoom out here just a little bit, you'll see there's a progress right here, and it tells you that this particular submission, this person, is 31% complete. Now, it tells you they started on January 30th, their last activity was January 30th, and that this submission will expire on February 6th. I believe we have it set up so that if they backed out and they aren't going to come back and complete it, that it would be, it'll just delete this record after a week. And in this case, it's February 6th. Same with these other ones where they got in here. These other ones are only 2%. They probably didn't even get to filling out the form very far, and they stopped because they either didn't have information or they were busy and they have to do it at a different time. So this is just to kind of give you an idea of what there is out there. And I can actually click on this survey ID on this one that says 31%. I can click on this and pull it up just like I see on the completed responses, and I can see how far they actually got. I can see the name of the person in this case because they typed it in, some other questions they did, and then if I keep scrolling, you'll notice that some of the questions are grayed out and they didn't fully complete, so it's probably about right here is where they stopped at question 43, and the rest of it is all grayed out, so you can tell where they stopped and where they dropped off on the form. You probably won't pay a whole lot of attention to that, but I wanted to point it out to you because you could come into the situation where a parent walks in the building and says, oh yeah, I went and I filled out the form online. And they don't indicate that they they stopped, halfway through, you could actually go in and look at this information under the response in progress and see if they're listed there, if they're not under the recorded responses. And in this case, the 12 responses that are completed for a Greenleaf. So that's just an FYI that you have the capability of looking at responses in progress. I'm going to go back to recorded responses for the moment because there's 12 there. Yeah. Does anybody have any questions? Go ahead and type it into the chat session and let us know if you have any questions you want us to address.
So the question I received is, do they need to complete the pre-registration if it is in progress when they are at school?
Oh, so to the extent, there's a couple ways you can address that. Number one, if they have if they're in progress and they come to school and you see that, they could just go and fill out the form again with the questions, especially if they're not very far. Like the one person that we showed the example of where they were 31%. In that situation, I would just say it's fast enough to go through those, especially those first handful of questions. They're just tapping an answer. They're not having to really type anything in other than their name. I would just say have them start over again and complete the process through, because in a lot of cases they may have had questions about or concerns about some of the questions and they need answers from you, and then you can kind of, help walk them through that when they get to that step in the process. Next question we have, can family continue a survey if they have stopped? Right now, the way we have it set up is that they can't go back. So say they're at home on their home computer and they start filling out the form. If they have the screen up, they likely can continue. If they exit out and they come back in, it's going to make them start over again. However, I will show you this one feature. Let me quick go in here. I'm going to go into actions. There are two things here. So for example, say that you have a parent who you go through the record for like Jessica Matuska here on this very top one, and you see that there are certain things that they hadn't filled out. They skipped over questions and you really want them to answer it. So first of all, I'm going to go into view response and look at this. I'm going to scroll through, see that most of the information they have provided, all of it. But say, for example, this may not be the best example, but it's the best one we've got at the moment. Say, for example, they went through and they were talking to you at the building and you wanted to, they did indicate that they do have some either gifted and talented student or special education need, or something that they didn't actually mark here on their form. You can go in and you can do what's called, there's two options. There's retake response and there's retake as new response. What this allows you to do is, if I do retake response, I can pop this up, I can copy this link, and I can email this link to them. What it is it's a link specifically to that record for Jessica that allows them to see everything they filled out. So the form is completely filled out as far as they went when they went to completion. They could go through and they can change any questions or answers to questions that they want to update it, and it will overwrite this particular record with updated information so that it's more accurate based on what information they have right at that point. And you can email that to them with this link. You can click the copy button, paste it into an email message, type in some text to send them, hey, we noticed that you did include X, an answer to X, or that your situation has changed and you need to update this information, you can actually provide in this link, it will give them all of the, questions with them filled out, and they can then change their answers on those. And when they submit it, it will overwrite what you see behind the screen here, behind this pop-up window here, and it will update their information. The difference between, so that's retake response. If I retake as new response, it will keep this original record here, but it'll then input a new record, so you'll have two versions of that record. The one that may have been half completed or old answers in there, and a new one that's a completely new response from them. I would probably recommend, if you're trying to update information from them, that you do the retake response. However, if you need to keep the information that they have right now, you could do retake as new response, and then that will provide them with a completely blank slate that they refill out the entire form again. I'm just going to hold off there and ask if you have any questions about that feature. Okay. Are there any questions about the data analysis interface as far as moving stuff left and customizing your columns, or even adding, creating a new field? Okay. I'm going to take a moment here, just double check anything that we might have missed. So one other thing I want to point out about editing records, if I go in and I click, let me actually get out of here. I don't want to mess this one up. Let me go back to projects, and we'll go to our test version of this. So I'm going to go to data analysis. So I have this record from Steph Cass. I want to go in and I want to turn my editing capabilities on. I can go in here and I can click on this field and I can say, okay, well, her name was spelled wrong. In this case, it's not, but I could say it was spelled wrong, or we needed other information, like I wanted to include, something else. So the last name really should be Malloy. L-L-O-Y. So I'm going to click off of here. Give this a second to rewrite the screen. Let me just refresh this a second. So you'll notice that in the upper right corner, this doesn't always appear right away. Sometimes you do have to refresh your screen. What it did is it put this little gray box in the corner. If any of you are familiar with Excel, you see this a lot in Excel. But in this case, what this does is this tells me that this field was edited. It tells me what the original data was in there. It tells me it was edited on Wednesday, January 31st at 8:35, and it tells you who edited that record. And it also gives you the option to close the window or revert to the original. So this is a backup in order to, typically you're going to go in here and you're going to edit for the purpose of, adding information that wasn't there or updating something. You're not just going to edit for editing's sake. But just so you know, it keeps track of that information. So you or one of your other staff in your front office is editing this, you can easily go in and you can see this gray box in the corner, and you can click and see what was edited, what the original answer was, what they changed it to, and you can kind of get an idea. And then if you have a question about it, you can always ask that person, why did you change that? So that's what that does when you're in the editing mode. And that will show up on any of these fields. So, but just keep in mind, sometimes you do need to just click the refresh button on your browser to get that to come up after you've made an edit. Sometimes it doesn't show up right away. So a couple other things we just wanted to remind you of. First of all, there is a capability to export your data. I'm just going to point out a couple things here in the export. Typically, you're going to do a CSV file, which is similar to it's an Excel file. You can import it into Excel, and you can organize your information. Now, by default, on the screen, you'll see that it's download all fields, and then you have the option of either doing the use choice text, which is what I would probably default to, or you can use numeric values. The numeric values don't have a lot of value in this case because they're just values that are automatically assigned by Qualtrics for your answer choices, and that's not going to be of as much value to you as them saying what their gender is, male, female, whatever. So you're going to use the choice text here. But one thing that you have the capability of doing is you can go in and you can uncheck this download all fields. What that does is that allows you to take only the fields that you have showing behind the screen, behind this pop-up window here. So everything that you're seeing on the screen behind here, when I uncheck this, it's only going to pull those columns that you've selected. Now, another thing to keep in mind is, I'm going to quick close this and show you this other feature. I can go in to add a filter, and I can say, you know what? I want to look up on student ID, or I want to look up on last name. So I could go in here, and I can add a filter. I can go in, and I can say child's full name, and I want to do a search on last name. So I've just added, just by adding the filter and picking the question and the answer in the question I want, I can then just start typing in, and I can say Malloy, hit enter. Oops. Hold on, I have to say select operator, I forgot that step. So say contains is what I typically do, because you may not know exactly how the name is spelled. So you do contains, and you can start typing part of the name, and then you type in your keyword. So I type in Malloy, and it pops up that record right there. You can do that on whatever fields you want. I could also manage filters, and I can add additional ones as well. You'll notice that I can insert a new condition, or I can insert new condition set. You can also say all or any, all meaning that it has to equal all these. So if I were to add in a new condition and say day, month or year, child's gender. So I can say child's gender, the operator is, and say male or female. Since I have all selected here, it has to be the last name of Malloy and be female. Let me uncheck that. So I could also say, it could be male or female, but in this case, I just want female. If I do any, then it either has to be Malloy or it could be anybody that's female. Not very helpful in this particular situation, but just so you get the idea of how you can filter on this. If I were to do an insert new condition set, that creates even more sophisticated filtering. It actually does a set within a nested set within this up here, and you can do some more stuff. I'm not going to get into that level of detail here, because typically you're just going to be searching on one, maybe two fields at the most. So you're going to be doing an any or all situation. For now, I'm going to remove that. And I'm going to cancel out of here. So if you want to get rid of this filter, it's as simple as clicking this minus sign, or if you want to click plus, it also brings you back into this screen. You can also click on Manage Filters. Manage Filters is basically the same thing as clicking the plus sign. It gets you to the same location so that you can manage your filters. I'm going to remove that filter for now, and we're back to listing everything that's here. Keep in mind that you can also go up here. If you're just looking at something simple as, I want to order my stuff, you can just click on the column header and go A to Z. One reason I'm pointing out the filters, besides just the capability to filter, if I go back to my export, import export, and I do export data, here's the thing to be careful of, or just be aware of. If I uncheck this download all fields, what this does is it takes into consideration not just the columns you have showing behind the pop-up window here, it will also take into consideration the filters that you have set up here. So if I filter, on last name, and I only want to pull out, the records that have last name of Malloy, it will do that for me when I click the download, and it will eliminate the other records and the other columns. So just be aware of that. If you have filters set up, this export takes those filters into consideration when it's exporting. So that's most of what we have as far as the interface is concerned. Do we have any questions?
We do have some questions. So one of the questions we just received was when it says, so when you say it will expire, if they were to show up on the 7th or 8th, can we pull up what they've done and keep going with them?
So to answer that, right now, if I go into let me go back to survey. I'm going to go to survey options. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom of survey options. Right now, the way your form is set up is that there's a partial completion section. Your form is set up to delete after a week. So when you saw that expire date, this is what will happen. That expire date doesn't mean it's going to submit it. You can go in to your form and under the survey options, if you wanted to keep those partially submitted records, you could change this to record and then change it to after 1 week, within 4 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, however you want to set that at. You have more options with the record. And then you also have the option of saying after the respondent's start of the survey or after their last activity. Right now, by the defaults that we've set up, yours is set to delete those partially recorded ones. If you're concerned about that, I would recommend going into your options. So you would go to your survey in the upper right left corner and then go to the survey options. It pops up the survey options window, scroll to the bottom, and you can adjust the partial completion and change it from delete to record if you want to keep those. And then what will happen when it expires is it will put those into the completion category in the upper right under data and analysis.
Another question was, can a response be skipped without answering?
We do have some fields, some questions that are required, like first name and last name. So there are some of those that will pop up as they're filling out the form. It will point them and it'll put a red text above the box, the field that they missed, and it'll ask them for a response. But there are some, like specifically ethnicity and race, we do not require them to answer that. I mean, they still have to be, be able to register. without answering those particular questions. But some of the stuff where we really need like a first name and a last name and a birth date, we're requiring those ones. We tried to eliminate requiring as many as possible in regard to not, barriers to filling out the form. But there are some that are required as you move through, and it will tell them if they missed any. When they click submit to go on to the next screen, it will give them a message.
The next question is, at our in-person training, it was mentioned that we could sort by parent's last name at the time of registration to see if that family has pre-registered. How can we sort that way?
Yep, so let me close out of survey options, go back to data analysis. So right now, I don't actually have on this screen, I don't have the parent's last name in here. So one thing that you'll want to do is go under tools, choose columns, and I'll actually want to go to the parent's last name. So parent guardian, if I'm gonna say choose parent guardian 1, oh, that's email address, sorry. Let me find the name. There we go. So I could go in and choose last name of parent guardian 1. It'll populate that in there for me on the right side. So here it is, parent guardian 1 living at the child's primary address. This is their last name. Now what I can do is I can sort on that and I can do A to Z, or I can then go in, since I have it here, I can, even if I don't have that there, I could go in and I can filter on that. So I can go down here and I can say parent guardian 1 last name, operator contains, and then I can type in Carlson and hit enter, and it pulls up Carlson, Lisa Carlson. Or I can delete that. I can remove that filter and it'll go back to my entire list, and I can sort by that. So it's the easiest way to do that is gonna be go under tools and choose that column to display. And then you can do just a simple sort, A to Z or Z to A. Or then you can also go in and add filter, choose that in addition to adding the column, and then do it by the parent's last name and put that as a filter in there. And then you can scroll through and see if they've actually provided information or submitted for the list of families that you have that you already have for children that are going to be registering for kindergarten, are supposed to be.
Another question is, where can we export to?
So in the export, there's a couple different ways. Number one, I can go into the actions and I can view response. I can export a complete record to PDF. So this is one, child being registered. I can export to PDF and export it, and it'll save it off as an electronic file. I can print that file to paper if I want to, or I can take that PDF file that I've saved to my desktop and I can load that into the documents folder on the student tab in Synergy and keep that there, and then that moves with the child. That would be one way that the nurse can then go in and look at the information in regard to the medical questions that are asked. There's two or three medical questions asked, and also the immunization form that they upload. The other way you can export information is you could actually export the information. I mentioned this before. You can download all its fields. This gives you a full Excel file, similar to what you're seeing behind this pop-up window with all the information, and you can do sorts in Excel if you want to. There's probably not as much need for that, although there may be some opportunities. But for now, if you want to include that information into their Synergy file, besides any information that you might fields you might copy and paste the answers for into specific fields in Synergy, you might also want to just export or save off as a PDF that entire document. Now, if you're to print that, this was brought up before as a question, how many pages does it create? If you were to print out this form, I believe it's about 5 or 6 pages total with all the information, because it's including the graphic and stuff. You know, this information as well with the questions with their answers below, and that's why it's so long. But if you're just putting it into the document folder into the student tab, then it's not going to take up space in regard to the number of pages.
Another question is, how do we get information into Synergy after they register through the Qualtrics form?
So again, as far as the information, some of it you're going to be copying and pasting into Synergy, and this was the thing we had mentioned before about that the Qualtrics, this kindergarten registration isn't synchronized with Synergy right now. That's a longer term project. So you'll be either copying and pasting, or in some cases, we actually had one, I can't remember which school it was, but one of our secretaries said, you know, I actually type a lot faster than I copy paste. Could I just type it in, you know, like their first name, last name into those respective fields in Synergy? And we're like, of course you can do that. If you're faster at typing, just take the information up on the screen in Qualtrics and type it in on your screen in Synergy into the respective fields. And then you can also do, if you just want a culmination of all the answers, again, you can go in to the Actions tab, do View Response, do an export as PDF, and then take that electronic PDF file and upload that into that student's document folder in the Student tab. So those would be the 2 ways getting the information into Synergy.
Any more questions? Well, it looks like that's all of the questions, so that pretty much completes our webinar. We did have some final reminders that we wanted to just quick go through with you guys prior to kindergarten registration on the 7th and 8th.
Yep. So one of the things that we just wanted to remind you of is we will be sending out a separate email, an additional email later on this week that we'll be providing the QR code for the form to provide on the 7th and the 8th, or even you know, before the 7th and 8th, to put you know, on the desk or taped to the wall. So the idea is that when parents come in and they're filling out the form there, they can scan the QR code with their own smartphone or with handful of devices that you guys are providing at your school, tablet, you know, iPad or a Chromebook, whatever the case may be. You only have to provide a few of them. And then we will have, in addition to the QR code, if they're not comfortable scanning that, we will have the school web address underneath there, underneath the QR code, as well as, you know, a heading at the top saying this is kindergarten pre-registration form. Scan the QR code or use the web address below and click on the button on your homepage. We will be putting those together and sending those to your schools so that you can print those out and have a couple of those available when families come in. The other thing we just wanted to remind you of is that following the kindergarten registration dates, a few days after that, you know, since they'll still be the top of your mind, we'll be providing metrics and feedback form powered by Qualtrics, just to get your feedback on how the experience went, what issues you ran into, what you might change, those types of things. So just be looking for that. But otherwise, that pretty much concludes the webinar for today.
So please reach out to us with questions prior to the 7th and 8th. We want you all to feel very comfortable using Qualtrics in the form, and because if you don't feel comfortable, then our parents won't. So we are here to support you 100%. So please call Quinn or me anytime, and we're here to help if you need additional help walking through Qualtrics or your specific form. So thank you so much. We'll be out at the schools on kindergarten registration dates too to see how this goes, and we just appreciate your support in making this process better for our families. So have a good day.
Thank you.